Hello, everybody, and you are very welcome to something a little bit different from what we normally do. We are providing live commentary for the Canadian Grand Prix qualifying from Montreal. The qualifying has just begun, and I'm very glad to say that I, Eoin Harrington, am joined by our regular analyst, Laurence Stephens, in the commentary box. Laurence, you're very welcome. What are your thoughts ahead of qualifying today?
Well, let's see if Mercedes can be challenged after a difficult weekend for them in Monaco. It's a little bit strange to be saying that finishing with a double podium is a bad weekend for a team, but there's no doubt that Mercedes have been hurt by what happened at Monaco last weekend. Let's see if Williams, Ferrari, or even Lotus can make life difficult for Mercedes this weekend.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things as we see Hamilton heading out on his warm-up lap along with one of the Red Bulls just behind him and one of the McLarens, obviously Alonso, because Jenson Button won't be participating in this and Sebastian Vettel is just getting ready to come out of the garage. That is one of the interesting things, is that Lotus seem to have been a revelation this weekend. They seem to be in much better form than they have been during the season so far. Do you think that's just practice form, or do you think they are actually a serious threat for qualifying and the race?
Well, Lotus have obviously been behind Red Bull and possibly Sauber at points, and other teams that aren't powered by that Mercedes engine. So I think that is the main focus of their game here in Canada. But whether it's practice form or race form, we'll have to see from qualifying what that brings to get some kind of indication as to whether that will be just practice or if it could be put into action here in qualifying.
Yeah, we're just seeing Fernando Alonso start his flying lap, and McLaren seem to be improving form race by race, and they seem to be gradually becoming more regular contenders for the points. Do you see them challenging maybe for a top 5 position soon, perhaps maybe by Britain or by Hungary? Do you see them challenging for a top 5 position anytime soon?
I think we're going to have to wait and see with the Honda engine how much they can bring out of it. But to be fair, they were 5 seconds behind in Australia. So
yeah.
If Alonso can get out of Q1 here at a track that has massive deficits for cars that don't have strong engines in a straight line, then that will be a good indication of just how far McLaren have come, and that'll also be an indication of just how far they can go and whether they can go as high as that. Obviously, Ron Dennis, with his usual high hopes, says that they can do that, but whether they can in general, we'll have to see. And Alonso's doing his lap at the moment. I think that's a 22.5 first sector, so let's wait and see what this lap brings, and we might be able to make a decision on that one.
Yeah, he's just come across the line to finish his lap, got a huge kick of oversteer out of the final corner and almost hit the wall of champions as we see a replay of Sergio Perez, who seems to be having issues, seems to be going very slowly into the hairpin. Looks like something wrong with his brake duct, smoke coming from the middle of the tyre, not something we normally see, so maybe problems for Force India there. Alonso is the only person to have set a lap time so far on a 1:18. So we're just waiting to see how that turns out. Sebastian Vettel is on a lap, and as now we can see the timing tower on the left, Bottas is top with a 1:18.3. Alonso's third now with 1:18.7, as Raikkonen has just come fastest on a 1:17.4. So the Ferrari's going for quick laps very, very soon. Do you see Ferrari perhaps contending for pole today, Laurence?
There is a Ferrari fighting for pole today. It'll be hard to say which driver it is, because I would say it's Vettel, but Raikkonen has looked strong all weekend, and I think for neutral fans of the sport, I don't think they really care which Ferrari driver it was that fought for pole today, preferably both of them, but if there was one, I don't think they really care who it was. But can they compete for pole position? I think we're going to, again, have to wait until Q2 before we can make a real judgment on that, or whether Mercedes are holding any performance within. But they've got higher speeds in the speed traps at the moment. I think Vettel was clocked doing 210 at its highest point compared to the Mercedes 208 top speed. So I'm sure it's possible, but they're going to have to do absolutely everything to make that happen.
Yeah, as we can see now, Lewis Hamilton has just gone fastest on a 1:16.3. He's fastest through the first two sectors. Kimi Raikkonen's just gone back to second with a 1:16.6, and Rosberg is just 4 tenths behind then on a 1:17 flat. As we see Romain Grosjean coming down the back straight in the Lotus DRS Open, slowing down for this really tough final corner. And we've seen a good few drivers struggling there this weekend, Laurence. We saw, obviously, Lewis Hamilton had a moment in practice 2 there yesterday. And we saw Fernando Alonso nearly hit the wall on his first qualifying lap there. As Lewis Hamilton goes fastest on a 1:15.9, Daniel Ricciardo goes sixth after him on a 1:17.4. Do you think we could see problems at the Wall of Champions during the race this weekend?
Could that happen? I think we'd be tempting fate if we said no, but I don't want to say I do want to see it happen, but it would definitely bring a lot of drama. Will it happen? It's a hard one to call.
Well, Valtteri Bottas has just clicked 336 kilometers an hour through the speed trap, and he goes fourth on a 1:16.6. So far, just to give you a rundown of the timing, Lewis Hamilton is fastest in the Mercedes, a 1:15.979. Just 200ths of a second back is his teammate Nico Rosberg, obviously the race winner in Monaco. As we have a look at Fernando Alonso's moment through the final corner, seemed to get a big, huge kick of oversteer and had a big drift and a big moment of opposite lock as he came through. Managed to save it though, and Fernando Alonso is currently in 12th on a 1:18.7, just behind the Toro Rosso of Max Verstappen, the number 33 on a 1:17.8. Both of those drivers will be taking grid penalties this weekend. Max Verstappen will be demoted 15 places due to his 5-place penalty from Monaco and his 10-place penalty for a change of engine. Raikkonen is third on a 1:16.6. On a 1:16.6 as well, just 0.08 of a second slower is Valtteri Bottas, 1:16.9 for Grosjean, 1:17.1 for Kvyat, just 0.03 of a second back is Marcus Ericsson. Then it's Daniel Ricciardo in the Red Bull, Nico Hülkenberg in the Force India, and rounding out the top 10 is Carlos Sainz in the Toro Rosso. And the only drivers not to have set a lap time yet are the Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel, the Sauber of Felipe Nasr, and obviously the McLaren of Jenson Button, which will not be taking part in this session. As you see, Alonso come across the line and he takes 11th place with a 1:17.3. Sainz come across the line and Sainz goes 7th. Pretty good lap from Carlos Sainz, just a second off Hamilton's pace. Just getting back to the race, Laurence. We have seen in Canada in the past brake temperatures have been a real problem. We've seen brake discs go up to as hot as 1,000 degrees Celsius as Maldonado goes third, half a second off Hamilton. Do you think that we could see a repeat of last season when Mercedes really misjudged it and ended up having major problems in the race due to their brake temperatures?
This is a track that's obviously got quite high speed. Let's make sure that we don't have any interference from my own TV there. This is a track that we rely quite a lot on the brakes, braking from high speeds, braking from 180 mile an hour at one point, and 200 from as high as 210 to 75 just before the final corners of the lap. I think Mercedes will have learned their lesson. This is still quite early days for them at the front as a challenging team. They'll be learning every second of every day. Events like Monaco and events like here last year that allowed Red Bull to win, as we see Hamilton almost take his Mercedes into the Wall of Champions there as well. We have a Lotus off that's just completely distracted me from what I was saying, and unsurprisingly that's Maldonado, but this is quite an old feed, so I don't know how long ago that happened.
Raikkonen has just gone third on a 1:16.259, just 0.02 of a second between Rosberg and Hamilton at the top. Rosberg on a 1:15.893 and Hamilton on a 1:15.895. You don't get much closer than that, Laurence.
You don't, you definitely don't.
I think there is a slight problem with Lawrence's feed being slightly behind, but we will try and make do with what we have. We'll just give you another rundown. With 8 minutes to go in the qualifying session, it is Rosberg from Hamilton, Raikkonen and Ferrari, Bottas fourth, Maldonado and Grosjean fifth and sixth for Lotus. Then the two Toro Rossos in seventh and eighth, Verstappen heading his teammate Sainz. And then it's Danny Kvyat in the Red Bull, Marcus Ericsson in the Sauber, the Red Bull, Daniel Ricciardo, Force India of Nico Hülkenberg. Then it's Fernando Alonso, as Fernando Alonso has just leapt past Nico Hülkenberg with a 1:17.237. And then in the last two spots to get into Q2 are Sergio Perez and Felipe Massa, as Felipe Nasr is now onto his first flying lap, as his first one was outside the 107% rule. And as he comes up towards the hairpin, he's 0.08 of a second off getting into Q2. One of the things that has been really present this season has been the battle in the midfield, Laurence, and only 6 points separating Sauber and I believe it's Force India in the championship standings, with Force India on 15 and Sauber on 21, and in between are Lotus and Toro Rosso. So it's really close down at the bottom. Who do you see of those being strongest this weekend?
Obviously, I think we have to discount straight away Sauber. They're running a Ferrari engine, which in the Ferrari manufacturer car is almost proving to be as strong as the Mercedes engine this weekend. But they're not running the upgraded engine. They say it's for, I think, what did they call it, strategic reasons or something like that. But we all know that's PR talk, and they can't afford the engine. So I think that automatically rules them out when you've got other runners in midfield with Mercedes engines, particularly Lotus and Force India. Just based on the aerodynamic packages of the car, I think we're going to see a good performance from Lotus this weekend. I expect Grosjean and Perez to be the outstanding drivers of the midfield this weekend, but I guess we'll have to see what Hülkenberg and Maldonado can bring.
Yeah, as we see Fernando Alonso being wheeled back into his garage, he seems like he thinks he's done enough to get through to qualifying two. Only one driver, well, there are two drivers in the drop zone that could potentially be challenging for a Q2 spot and would probably be hoping to get through. That is Felipe Massa in the Williams and Sebastian Vettel in the Ferrari. As we see Lewis Hamilton again going over the sausage curbs at the last chicane. So that's not good for Lewis Hamilton. He's doing it again. He had a moment there in free practice 2 yesterday. Just as you were talking about the Sauber problems with the engine, I saw Felipe Nasr gained half a second in the last sector, and you have to say that is most likely down to the straight line speed, but that is a ridiculous amount of time to gain in the last sector of a Grand Prix track, Laurence.
It is, and is that where Nasser had his accident this in FP3, or am I just...
I think it was actually, yeah, it was down the back straight as he was leaving the tyres. He just lost the back end and flew into the wall. So obviously slightly better fortunes there than this morning.
That's even more surprising that he's made up that amount of time in the sector that he's not going to have been confident in. But it looks like, based on where he is at the moment, he's 14th with that lap. He might have to do a little bit better than that to find his way into Q2.
As we see the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton being disassembled in the garage, it seems like he is done for this session, and he is obviously just going to start getting ready for qualifying two. Him and his teammates separated by just 0.02 of a second at the top of the timing boards, just ahead of the Ferrari of Kimi Raikkonen. In the drop zone at the moment, Felipe Massa in the Williams, Will Stevens and Roberto Merri in the two Manners, and Sebastian Vettel, who was still not settled at the time, in the Ferrari. Maldonado on his second flying lap now, as we watch him come down one of the shorter straights on this track, but the track is kind of filled with straights. Maldonado just coming through the chicane and running up towards the hairpin now. Maldonado is fifth at the moment, actually. A very good performance from him, with his teammate just behind him. And Maldonado is only a 10th off pole through the second sector. So excellent performance here. And as we come down to the area of the track where the Mercedes engine will most likely play to his strengths, we could see Maldonado challenging for a top spot here in qualifying one, which is great news, Laurence, for the neutral just looking for a bit of excitement this weekend.
It definitely is. I think we've already spoken about neutral excitement this weekend. We could see Williams, Lotus and Ferrari all saying hello to Mercedes, and even lower down in the pack with Force India seeing what they can do against Sauber and others. So I think there is a lot of neutral excitement this weekend, but we'll definitely still have to see. Too early days at the moment.
Maldonado goes third, just 2/10 off the time of Rosberg as we ride on board with Daniel Ricciardo. He comes through the final corner, obviously the race winner here last year, and Daniel Ricciardo goes sixth on a 1:16.767. We also have Danny Kvyat coming through the final corner, and Sebastian Vettel finally making his way out of the pit lane for his first lap, and Danny Kvyat overtakes his teammate, goes into sixth, and we are just riding on board here with Nico Hülkenberg, who goes fourth. So the Force India of Nico Hülkenberg has leapt up to fourth place. We saw they were strong in practice, but we thought that was just practice form, Laurence. Obviously, they have a little bit in the bag here.
That is, I think we have to give plaudits to that. Oh, as I was about to say, congratulations to other drivers. Grosjean puts in an absolute storm of a lap, and he's jumped the Mercedes, jumped Rosberg and Hamilton with that lap with a 15.833. And I was just about to say just how good Kvyat has been against Ricciardo this weekend after his best ever result in F1 from Monaco last weekend. But look at some of those other drivers. Fantastic lap from Maldonado there to go 0.2 of a second behind his teammate. Hulkenberg's had a good lap there as well. Bottas, I'm not sure what he's doing that far down. I'm sure he'll come out for another lap soon to better that, because if Grosjean can do a 1:15.8, I'm sure the Williams can match that.
And finally, we see Sebastian Vettel coming through the final corners to start his flying lap. He'll only have one go at it because there's only a minute and 17 seconds left in qualifying one. Comes through the first two corners. We are presuming that the Ferraris will not have any trouble getting through this qualifying session. So we're riding on board with Vettel as he comes down towards turns 3 and 4, two of the fastest corners on this track. We saw Nico Rosberg have a big moment there in the race last year, coming through turn 5 up to the second chicane, and he's 7/10 down in the first sector. That's very worrying for Ferrari. We could be seeing a shock here in qualifying one, because that would put him down in 8th place, and that's only through the first sector. So worrying times here for Ferrari, Laurence, if they don't get their act together through the final two sectors.
Yeah, I was just about to mention, going through the first few corners of this lap, he seemed to be having a little bit of a problem. I think he had some snap oversteer there as he went through turn 2. My feeder's obviously caught up now since he's going down the main straight, and I think we're going to be waiting for a sector time any time now. But that did not look good.
He's going down the back straight now, coming into the final corner, and
here we go.
That won't be good enough.
This is Judgment Day. Oh, and he just makes it, but Massa in the Williams will almost certainly take him. He's not even been able to beat the Honda engine in the McLaren. That is a shock for Sebastian Vettel. Has there been a problem with his car? Because Raikkonen's got through fine.
Yeah, Vettel is down in 16th place. Is this tactic going to backfire on them as Massa comes down the pit lane? So Massa is out in qualifying one as well. Two huge shocks here. If Sebastian Vettel's next lap isn't good enough, and Felipe Massa's lap here, he's not going to have time to set another lap. So we have our first big casualty here in qualifying for the Canadian Grand Prix. Felipe Massa in the Williams is going to be starting from 17th on the grid tomorrow. Huge shock here, Laurence.
If you told Fernando Alonso this morning that he would be out qualifying the Williams, I think he would take that any day of the week, as we see Ericsson jump up just behind Bottas, 0.2 behind Bottas, which is 11th for now, as the other Toro Rosso of Carlos Sainz then takes that position. But anyway, as I was saying, if you told Fernando Alonso, who was qualifying in front of the Williams, he would take that any day of the week. And will Vettel fix his? No, he won't. It's a one.
Vettel coming down the back straight, and Vettel will not be in qualifying 2. This is a huge shock in qualifying for the Canadian Grand Prix. So in the drop zone, from Marussia, we have Will Stevens and Roberto Merri, and then we also have Felipe Massa in the Williams and Sebastian Vettel in the Ferrari, who will not be participating in qualifying 2. This is a huge shock, Laurence.
Surely he must have a problem with that car, because his teammates got through okay. He must do, because surely they wouldn't have left him that late. But 2 casualties with Q1 there, that is a massive shock. That's 2 teams that really should be challenging Mercedes. And I'm sure Toto Wolff, Niki Lauda and the two Mercedes drivers will be very pleased at this qualifying result already, because that should not be happening for either of those two.
Well, very worrying scenes here for Ferrari. We thought they would be able to challenge Mercedes for pole, but it is going to be down to Kimi Raikkonen now, and perhaps even Romain Grosjean, who managed to top qualifying one here in Canada. We're going to give you a rundown of the standings now. Romain Grosjean in the number 8 car, the Lotus, in first place. The number 6 Mercedes of Rosberg in second. Number 44 Mercedes of Hamilton in third, followed by the 13 Lotus of Maldonado. 27 Nico Hülkenberg in the Force India is fifth. Number 7 in the Ferrari, Kimi Raikkonen is sixth. Number 33 in the Toro Rosso, Max Verstappen is seventh. Number 3 in the Red Bull, Daniel Ricciardo is eighth. Number 26 in the Red Bull, Daniel Kvyat is ninth. Rounding out the top 10 in the number 77 Williams is Valtteri Bottas. As we see a replay, was there a mistake here for Felipe Massa as he locked up going through the hairpin and most likely rode off the lap as a result, and then he lost the back end coming out of the hairpin, had a big snap of oversteer. So now we know why Felipe Massa rode off that lap and why he will be starting 17th tomorrow. In 11th place is the 55 Toro Rosso of Sainz. 12th is Marcus Ericsson in the Sauber, number 9. Number 11 of Sergio Perez is 13th in the Force India. Number 12, Sauber of Felipe Nasr will start 14th, and rounding out the top 15 in the McLaren Honda is number 14, Fernando Alonso. So we weren't expecting too many shocks in qualifying here, Laurence, but we have a huge shock here. The Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel is out. And, well, do you think this bodes well for Kimi Raikkonen? Do you think we could potentially see Kimi Raikkonen struggling now in qualifying too?
Personally, as a neutral, I'd hope that there isn't a problem that will affect Kimi as it has with Seb. But it does appear there was a big problem, because about 18 minutes ago, according to Twitter, Vettel boxed the car and said there is something wrong. And it looks as though it's a problem with the recovery system, which could have cost Vettel time on the main straights, on the two main straights on this circuit, which is probably explaining why Fernando Alonso has managed to take a Honda-powered McLaren. I was almost about to say Ferrari there. I was going back a year. A Honda-powered Ferrari would be quite interesting. His Honda-powered McLaren, I got it right that time, taking his Honda-powered McLaren out into Q2. He'll be very happy with that performance, but we can't really say that for his teammate Jenson Button.
Yeah, we're just going to have a look at the team radio from Sebastian Vettel, who was told P16 by his team, and well, his reply did not get past the censors, so very disappointed, Sebastian Vettel. We also had team radio from Felipe Massa, who said no power, unbelievable, it is completely off. So obviously problems for both of them there, and well, that's not good news for Williams, because for Williams or Ferrari, Laurence, because we could see problems for Valtteri Bottas and Kimi Raikkonen now.
Obviously, again, speaking and throwing that word neutrals around, hopefully that doesn't happen, because we do want to see a fight between the other Ferrari left in it and other Mercedes cars still in the fight. Could we see a massive shock? We've already had two. Could Hamilton succumb to the pressure? Could Rosberg not get a clean lap in? Could we see something that we haven't seen for a long time in Formula One? I think over the past 2 seasons, we've only had, maximum 3 teams get pole position, 3 or 4. We've had Mercedes, Ferrari and Williams. I can't think of any others that have got pole positions in the last 2 years.
Yeah, no, it is a real shock here. And perhaps now there is a chance for Force India and for Lotus to fight for top 5 spots here now, especially with their pace this morning. They seemed a little bit faster than Ferrari on the short runs. We could potentially see Romain Grosjean and Maldonado and Nico Hülkenberg in the top 5 here.
We could, but unfortunately I won't be able to see who gets into the top 10 for Q2, because I have to be off temporarily, but I'll be back for Q3 to see if Force India, Lotus and even Valtteri Bottas, who, let's not forget, got one of his best ever qualifying performances here in 2013. I think he qualified on the 2nd row for Williams. We'll see. I will be back in time to see if those guys can challenge Mercedes in Q3. Until then, I'll see you soon.
Okay, so we have lost Laurence for the moment. Laurence Stephens is leaving us for the moment, but he will be back hopefully for Q3 as we see qualifying 2 begins. We're having a look at the speed trap figures, and it was the Williams of Valtteri Bottas top of the speed trap, which doesn't make much sense when you realize that his teammate was complaining of a lack of power in Q1. He was top of the speed trap on a 337.7, just zero point 0.5 kilometers an hour faster than Maldonado. And of course, slowest in the speed trap was Felipe Massa, 315 kilometers an hour. So that is a 22-kilometer an hour difference between the two Williams. So worrying times for them. We can see some tweets here. Nigel Mansell saying that Williams should be much higher up the order. It's disappointing for them. We're just looking through as we can see lots of surprise tweets about Vettel being out. Lots of people saying perhaps he could have a fight back on tomorrow, which will add to the racing and it will add to the excitement of tomorrow. So we have a big shock here. Just if you are only joining us now, or if you're turning on your TV and wondering what has gone on, well, we can tell you that it is Lewis Hamilton who is probably the favourite for pole position. One of his main rivals for pole position, Sebastian Vettel, has been eliminated in qualifying 1. A huge shock, as the Ferraris were believed to be in contention for a possible pole position or a possible race win. That is a huge shock. We have to get to the bottom of why he did not get through, and we are hoping to find out why as soon as we can, as we see Felipe Nasr start his qualifying lap here in Q2. Both Saubers through to Q2. Good job from them, both to get through. As we have a look now, and we are looking at the timing screens, we haven't had any lap times set yet in Q2, but on track at the moment are Romain Grosjean, Max Verstappen, Nico Hulkenberg, Daniel Kvyat, Carlos Sainz, and I believe Maldonado and Ericsson are also out as well. We are waiting to see what will happen though. We are trying to get to the bottom of what the problem for Sebastian Vettel was. We are not sure about that. We know that Felipe Massa had a problem with his engine. It may have been running low on power. Maybe the ERS failed. We don't like to speculate, but it seems like that would be the most likely. It seems like that would be the most likely solution to their problem. We are trying to find out. Nobody seems to know what the problem was with Sebastian Vettel. As we watch Felipe Nasr come down the back straight, Sauber has been picking up a lot of time through these final straights because of the low aero on the car and because of the Ferrari engine, and he comes across the line to set a 1:17.107. So Felipe Nasr is the first person to set a lap time, immediately followed by Max Verstappen, who has set a 1:16.692 in the Toro Rosso. We are just looking to see if we can find anything wrong with Sebastian Vettel, because he was in contention for the top 3. The start, we were saying potentially he could have split the two Mercedes. That is a huge shock, as we see Maldonado go top on a 1:16.414, and now Romain Grosjean, his teammate, goes top on a 1:15.916. We are going to have a look and see what the times were in qualifying 1 to see how that compares. And Romain Grosjean's lap in Q1 was a 1:15.833, I think. So just a tenth off what he was running in qualifying 1. As we see Nico Hulkenberg come down to the hairpin. Hulkenberg had a good run through free practice, was 4th on Friday's running, and obviously was doing well in free practice 3 today as well, as he passes the Sauber of Felipe Nasr, who had a big off in free practice 3 this morning. Don't know if you have seen it, but he was weaving down the back straight to get his tyres up to temperature and ended up smashing into the wall and destroyed the front of the Sauber, as Nico Hulkenberg goes second on a 1:16.066. So the Force Indias really are much faster than we were expecting them to be this weekend. We have to see, of course, what the pace of the Mercedes is, but so far that's looking good for Force India, and they will be hoping to be doing well in tomorrow's race. As you see the other Ferrari of Kimi Raikkonen, will it be playing on his mind that there could be problems for him? But we see that those potential thoughts are not affecting his speed. He has just gone fastest through the second sector, and obviously he will not lose any time down here. The Ferrari engine straight line speed is admirable. I'm just going to go and try and find some tweets here. We're trying to. Also, I would like to say that you can follow this on the GP Right Now Twitter account as well. It's just at GP Right Now. That is being controlled by the leader of the site. And Raikkonen goes fastest by 0.3 of a second on a 1:15.6. So Raikkonen really does mean business. Perez outdoes his teammate, goes just 0.3 of a second behind on a 1:15.974. And we are watching Max Verstappen come down the back straight. We also have the timing from Maldonado, who's half a second down to the first two sectors. Max Verstappen now coming down the back straight, obviously running much lower top speed than perhaps the Ferrari and Mercedes engine cars. Comes to the final corner nice and tidy. A little hop off the grass as he comes off. Most drivers are doing that. DRS Open across the line for a 1:16.5, which puts him 7th on the timing screens. Maldonado coming through the final corner. He did very well in Q1, took 4th, and he comes across the line and takes 5th with a 1:16.117, just half a second off the best time of Raikkonen. Ferraris, just to give you a kind of rundown of what has happened so far. Obviously, from free practice 3 this morning, we lost Jenson Button, who had a failure of his engine in free practice 3, and he ended up not being able to participate in qualifying. His teammate Fernando Alonso made it through to qualifying 1, happily enough, and he finished just 15th in qualifying 1, and he is through to participate in this session now. There are just over 7 minutes left in this session as we look to see who will take pole position for the Canadian Grand Prix. It is Raikkonen in the number 7 first, then Grosjean in the number 8, Perez in the number 11, Hülkenberg number 27, Maldonado number 13, Kvyat in the 26, Sainz in the 55, Verstappen in the 33, Nasser in the 12, and Ericsson in the 9, who are currently in the top 10 places. And we see Hamilton going 0.3 of a second faster than Raikkonen through the second sector. So definitely Mercedes looking very strong here, turning up the power of the engine. And Rosberg has gone faster through the second sector. So Rosberg is going faster than his teammate here. So we could have another upset in qualifying. Hamilton coming through the final corner now, lovely and tidy. None of his antics from free practice. DRS Open across the line. What's this lap time going to be? It is a 1:14.6. So a hugely fast lap time as Lewis Hamilton gained 0.6 of a second to that last sector. And Nico Rosberg goes second on a 1:14.673. So he lost a lot of time to Lewis Hamilton in that last sector. He's 0.2 of a second up on Lewis Hamilton as they went into the final sector. And we can see the fastest sector times here. Rosberg is fastest through the first sector on a 20.9. Rosberg fastest through the second sector on a 24.1. But Hamilton, crucially, fastest through the last sector on a 29.5. Valtteri Bottas comes across to start his flying lap here in qualifying 2. 6.5 minutes left to go before we find out who will be in qualifying 3. We are awaiting to be rejoined by Laurence, who we are hoping will be back for qualifying 3. This is the GP Right Now qualifying commentary for the Canadian Grand Prix. You can also follow qualifying live on our Twitter feed at GP Right Now, where we will be giving updates, team radio excerpts, and many more pieces of information over this. We have a graphic showing the G-force of Bottas's Williams as he comes down towards the last chicane before the hairpin, experiencing G-force of 7.1 through there. And we come up to the sector split. How is this going to match up to the Mercedes? It is a 45.6, so just 0.5 of a second down. It is Hamilton who is fastest from Rosberg as we see Bottas come down the back straight, and this is where Williams will be very fast. We know them as a very low downforce, low drag team with a Mercedes engine, so this could be where they gain a lot of time. 335.1 kilometers an hour down that back straight. Comes through the final corner, brushing the wall, big kick of oversteer as he came through there. This isn't going to be good enough for first place, but he does take third with a 1:15.5, 0.8 of a second down on the two Mercedes. And I am told now that we are about to be rejoined by Laurence. Are you there, Laurence? Can we hear from you?
Yes, I am here. And just having a look at the standings at the moment, Hamilton is first at the moment, Rosberg second, Bottas third, Raikkonen fourth. So interestingly, even if we go down to fifth and sixth with Grosjean and Perez, as we were saying in Q1, it looks like it will be Bottas and Raikkonen challenging in as the teammates of the drivers who were strangely knocked out in Q1, Massa and Vettel. So who else have we got? We've got Perez there, who I said would be the leading Force India driver this weekend. And so far, it looks as though that is the case.
I don't know if you heard this, Laurence, but I was just telling our listeners that through the first part of qualifying, we had the speed trap figures, and Valtteri Bottas was fastest through the speed trap on a 337 kilometers an hour, and his teammate was slowest on 315 kilometers an hour, so 22 kilometers an hour slower than his teammate through the speed trap. That does suggest that there was a problem with the power unit during that session.
That that doesn't sound very promising at all. Let's just hope that Bottas and Raikkonen don't see problems of that nature, and they are able to challenge the Mercedes this weekend for either a place on the front row or pole position. I mean, right now it's not looking as though that's going to be possible because Bottas is almost a second off with 0.8 of a second off, and Raikkonen is 0.9 of a second off. But you never know what Q3 can bring. We saw earlier in the weekend Hamilton could not find a single lap to put together, with red flags, with spinning, with crashing into the wall when he aquaplaned. So it's not impossible we could see a similar situation in Q3. So we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, Maldonado has just gone fifth fastest on a 1:15.757. His teammate is just in one position behind him in sixth, Romain Grosjean. As we see Fernando Alonso get ready to go out, I think we are going to see this McLaren go out. He is currently in 14th, so well outside of contention. In the drop zone at the moment, Carlos Sainz in the Toro Rosso, Max Verstappen in the Toro Rosso. Both of them are on laps at the moment and running personal bests. However, Felipe Nasr in the Sauber, who has just set a lap time, not particularly fast though, still in 13th. 14th is Fernando Alonso, who has just gone out on track, and in last place in qualifying 2 is Marcus Ericsson. So we are hoping to see those drivers go out and get another chance to set a lap, as we see Felipe Nasr go on to a flying lap now in the Sauber. No, I apologize, he's going on to a slowdown lap, and we just see why that is. He locked up heavily into the last corner, Laurence, and we've been seeing a lot of drivers struggling into the last corner this weekend.
We have, and I think if you look at that slow-mo replay, it looks as though Nasr has a little bit of a problem on that front right tyre, and that explains why as he jumps over the curb there. Quite interestingly, if we look at the drop zone, is very, very close between Max Verstappen and his Toro Rosso teammate Carlos Sainz, but it's not really the case with Sauber. I think there's almost half a second difference between those two. So I think that is quite an interesting, or was quite an interesting thing to note, that there was such a small margin between the two Toro Rosso teammates. But it looks as though Sainz has just gone and done a lap whilst we were watching the replay, and he's jumped up into the top 10. And Verstappen, I don't know if he improved as well, but he's just over 0.3 of his teammate's time.
Yeah, we're just having a look at the times here, and the times have been incredibly close this weekend, actually, Laurence. That's one of the things that has been getting me. We have 2 people just 1 second off Hamilton, and we have 3 people 1.3 seconds off. Ricciardo and Sainz separated by 1,000th of a second. We have 2 people. Separated by just 4,000ths of a second, or 400ths of a second, to be at Ericsson, and then just another 10th back is Verstappen. So the times have been extremely close this weekend, not something we often see in Formula One.
It isn't, but there's definitely no complaints from anyone about the times being so close. I mean, this is a 1:14 lap, which probably does help the drivers get so close to one another. As I mean, just look at the top 2. Rosberg is, what's that? Is that 100th of a second, just over behind his teammate? It's quite crazy, really, but it's understandable how they are so close.
Well, we saw before the season started that Lotus were very confident that they would have a good season, and we are kind of seeing that promise be realised now, as Grosjean is going to out-qualify Kimi Raikkonen in qualifying 2. He's gone third, just half a second off the Mercedes. Raikkonen is a further 10th back, so that's hugely promising for Lotus. As we see Alonso come through the final corner, is Alonso going to do enough to get into Q3? No, he isn't. He's 2/10 of a second off. Alonso goes 13th. And are we going to see any more improvements? Here we see Daniel Ricciardo. He's in 9th at the moment, so he's in the danger zone as he comes through the final corner, though, looking very fast. He's looking to improve on a... he's gone 9th. He hasn't improved. Max Verstappen goes 12th. Max Verstappen hasn't made it out of the drop zone. Daniel Kvyat is in there as well. Is he going to make it out of the drop zone? Daniel Kvyat goes 8th. Daniel Kvyat gets in, and he has dropped his teammate into danger here because Carlos Sainz and Marcus Ericsson are still on laps, out of qualifying for sure. Are Verstappen, now Ericsson, Alonso and Nasser, and we see Jos Verstappen in the Toro Rosso pits take off his headphones, so that's not good for him. Are we going to see any more changes? I don't think we are. I think, yeah, Carlos Sainz has just pitted. So, through to qualifying 3, from Mercedes, first and second, Hamilton and Rosberg, the Lotus of Romain Grosjean, the Ferrari of Kimi Raikkonen, the Williams of Valtteri Bottas, the Lotus of Pastor Maldonado, the Force India of Hülkenberg, Red Bull of Kvyat, Force India of Perez, and the Red Bull of Ricciardo. What do you think of that qualifying session, Laurence? Just 1 or 2 surprises, perhaps. Carlos Sainz and Max Verstappen had been looking quite strong, and all of a sudden they're out. Perhaps we were expecting it on a circuit where we were expecting Renault to struggle.
I think the most predictable thing there is that the Toro Rossos ended up very close, as we were saying they would be. I think there was 2/10 splitting the pair of them. Sainz just beating Max Verstappen, the 17 or 18-year-old, by such a small margin. I think we should commend Honda and McLaren, especially. We've all been talking about the people we're shocked at seeing drop out of qualifying so early, being Vettel and Massa. But Honda and McLaren together have made the best of that situation, and it looks as though they're proving to be a little more reliable, even if Jensen wasn't even able to settle that because of an ERS issue. It's good that Fernando Alonso has managed to get into Q2. He won't be pushing on to Q3 anytime soon, but I think we should mostly commend McLaren for their professional effort today to get into Q2 at a track like this.
Yeah, we definitely should, because McLaren, we were expecting them to be running very low down due to their disadvantage in a straight line. I'm just looking at the times from last year, and the Q2 time this year is over 2/10 of a second faster than the fastest time from Q3 last year. Laurence, that's a huge improvement and does show that these cars are getting faster year on year.
Yes, they are getting faster. I don't think we can really be surprised by that. It was a brand new formula last year, and I remember before the lights went out for the 2014 season in Australia, I remember some of the predictions people were making about how many cars would finish the race, and I think it was something ridiculous. Some people were saying that not even 10 cars would finish, even though that wasn't the case. I think we had more finishes in 2014 than this year's season opener, but I think everyone expected a rough ride for the start of the 2014 season. It's why McLaren was so good in that opening round with a double podium, and they led the constructors as well after the first race. And I think that really shows how raw it was then, and over time, as you'd expect, it's become more plain sailing, if you like.
Yeah, we have just seen Sebastian Vettel giving an interview to the BBC where he said he just simply did not have the power in Q1, so clearly a problem with his power unit. And that probably would worry, to an extent, it probably would worry Kimi Raikkonen and Laurence, but his worries have probably been put to bed by the fact he took 4th in Q2.
Listen, it's not going to help Raikkonen or Bottas to think about their teammates' troubles. All they have to do is get out there and beat each other, because even if Mercedes do take pole position, as everyone expects they do, and in fact fill up the front row of the grid as expected, it's going to be very tight. Even Force India, who I can't remember another time. Have they had both cars into Q3 at any point up to this point so far in 2015. I'm not sure if they
We will
have.
research that and we will find the answer.
I'll wait whilst we wait for you to do that and prove me wrong, as I'm sure will inevitably happen. It's very close, even between the team like Force India that haven't really been on the pace, and Ferrari who have undisputably. I mean, they won in Malaysia. It's going to be very tight between at least three teams: Ferrari, Lotus, and Force India, and that's forgetting Williams. So that's four in there. It's going to be very tight between those four, and if we think that that's what six or seven cars, if we count the teammates that are out, that is any position between third and about eighth, which is a big difference, even on track where you can overtake so easily as you can at Montreal.
Yeah, Montreal is one of the few races every year where you can be confident that you are going to have an exciting race due to the open nature of the track, the fast nature, and the kind of wide. It's one of the wider street circuits we go to. And yes, it is indeed the first time that Force India have had both cars in Q3 this season, which is a pretty good feat for them, especially around a track where you need a stable car to get around. So it shows that their car is improving, Laurence.
It definitely does. I should make sure that I don't mute myself. It does show their car's improving. How much of that is down to a Mercedes engine that's obviously going to be shown and highlighted in a good way at a track like this with two long straights, it's hard to tell, but it is promising for Force India, who haven't really had a brilliant start to the season. I think unarguably they have a quality driver lineup. No one ever shuts up about how good Hulkenberg is, and I think Perez has proved quite a few people wrong after his bad season with McLaren in 2013 to weigh himself out alongside Hulkenberg and not be beaten by him as most people predicted. I think that's a quality driver lineup. They've got quite a few new sponsors in, thanks to Sergio signing for them last year. And based on the sponsors, which I'm assuming means more money in, and getting a new wind tunnel and all that sort of thing, it is surprising that they are this far back, but it is promising to see that they might be on a way to recovery by getting both cars into Q3 here.
One of the things I actually meant to mention in Q1, as you mentioned, getting new sponsors, and that is the fact that we've seen an almost a completely different team from Manor this weekend. They seem to have much more sponsors on the car. They seem to be hiring. They have a test driver now, and they've hired Bob Bell. They seem to be making strides towards perhaps competing next season.
Yeah, I think as part of Manor's recovery, they did actually say in a couple of their press releases and that sort of thing that they issued to the media that they were looking at it in the long term, and they didn't want someone a little bit like Tony Fernandez who comes in and he wasn't really in it for the long term. He expected to put the money in and almost get results instantaneously. I think this new consortium that have come in at Manor, they appreciate that this is the pinnacle of motorsport. Turning around from last to top of the grid doesn't happen in a few seasons, and I think they appreciate that. And it's great to see that they've got two drivers. Mary's stayed on, which wasn't really expected. We all thought he'd drop out after the first couple of races based on their press release, but he stayed with them. They've signed that third driver who was a GP2 winner, actual series winner rather than just a race winner. They've got Bob Bell from Mercedes. They've done a lot that's promising, and it wouldn't surprise me based on the new sponsors they've got and the drivers and the signings they're making. It wouldn't surprise me if we did see them eventually move up the field. And as we saw last year at Monaco and Suzuka when Jules had his accident, Marussia, as they were last season, are very much a racing team. They're not there to complain about the sport and the politics and all that sort of thing. They are simply there to race, and that's refreshing to see in a sport that's got the problems ours does right now. So hopefully we will see them fight further up the field in future, and the sponsors and everything we've already mentioned is a good indication that that might be about to happen.
Yeah, it is a very promising situation for Manor, especially when we weren't expecting them to be on the grid at all this season. As we see Kimi Raikkonen start his lap, we had a beautiful aerial shot of the circuit. It really is a very picturesque location here in Montreal, Laurence, and it's one of the most popular locations on the Formula One calendar.
It is, and when you look at just how close some of these lap times are between teammates and even between other teams with quite different packages, it's quite understandable why drivers like this circuit so much. I think the marshals and the people that run Canada's Grand Prix every year, they've got a proven record. I think they're probably the third more up there with the best marshals in Formula One outside of maybe Silverstone and Monaco. The track itself has been proven both by the drivers and the fans as one that's liked. I think the location of it in the Seaway, the way it is, I think everyone likes that as well because it's something a bit different. And in general, it's just a track that there aren't any major faults with it.
Yeah, summed up pretty perfectly there by our analyst Laurence Stephens. As we see a shot of Sebastian Vettel in the garage, he did not make it through Q1. His teammate is fastest so far in Q3. He is on a 1:15.126, so that is very clearly just a banker lap to have just in case things don't go their way later on. Then we have Maldonado just 2/10 behind, and we have Hulkenberg a second behind, and then Perez 3 seconds off. Perez clearly just doing a bit of a warm-up lap. Valtteri Bottas coming down the back straight now into the chicane. What kind of a lap is this going to be from the man whose teammate went out in Q1? Hamilton has just set a lap, an unrepresented lap, 7 seconds down. Valtteri Bottas sets a 1:15.369, so he goes 0.04 of a second slower than Maldonado and into third. And do you think we can genuinely expect Lotus to be competing with Williams in the race tomorrow, Laurence, and even perhaps with Ferrari? Do you think they're in contention for a podium spot?
I would, if I had to put money on it, I'd say that Raikkonen will get that third podium spot tomorrow, but it's definitely not out of the question for any of those drivers to go and take that final spot. I mean, if Mercedes have problems like they did at the end of the race last season with a Renault engine going and winning the race, that would basically be the equivalent of a Honda engine winning this time around. I think Mercedes have shown on a couple of occasions they are vulnerable when they are put under pressure. So I think it all comes down to just how close Ferrari and other teams can get to them during this session. As to whether we could expect something a little unusual to happen tomorrow.
Well, I don't think anything unusual is going to be happening in qualifying today because Lewis Hamilton has just gone 0.7 of a second faster than Kimi Raikkonen on a 1:14.393, just 0.7 off the lap record here in Canada, so quite impressive there. Nico Rosberg goes second on a 1:14.702, so Hamilton very much in the ascendancy here in Canada as we see Toto Wolff and Niki Lauda in the garage, perhaps discussing the order in which they're going to go out later on. And that does really bode well for Mercedes, who obviously have had problems in qualifying in the past. Their strategy has been questioned at times, especially after Hungary last year and obviously after their error in Monaco. And I think that the thing they just really want to have today, Laurence, is a qualifying session where nobody is obstructed by problems and everyone just has a fair run after the farce in Monaco of the pit stop.
Well, so far it looks as though that their request or their wish for a free and fair qualifying session is taking place. I don't think that's going to be the final laps of either of those drivers. Hamilton and Rosberg, I'm sure, will both go and improve or attempt to improve on that lap. I can't see that Rosberg, after last year's performance where he went and put his Mercedes on pole, I can't imagine that he would be happy to finish 0.3 of a second behind Hamilton in this session. So I'm sure that it will be much closer between those two by the end of the session. And hopefully we can see a much fairer fight than we saw last time out, where ultimately Lewis might have influenced the decisions of his mechanics, but that doesn't change the fact that his race victory was thrown away so much to the extent that he almost didn't even finish on the podium.
Yeah, as we see Nico Rosberg being roped back into the garage, just under 5 minutes to go in qualifying for the Canadian Grand Prix. Who's going to be on pole position? It is Hamilton in first at the moment, Nico Rosberg in second, Kimi Räikkönen in third, Roman Grosjean in fourth, Valtteri Bottas is in sixth, just behind the Lotus of Pastor Maldonado. Nico Hülkenberg is seventh, Danny Kvyat in the Red Bull is eighth, and Sergio Perez is ninth, and we have not had any lap time yet from Daniel Ricciardo in the Red Bull. Daniel Ricciardo, obviously the race winner here last year in one of the most enthralling races of the year, when he managed to capitalize on a brake failure on both of the Mercedes cars, and we see him in the car. It looks like he is taking his gloves off. It looks like we may not be seeing a lap time from Daniel Ricciardo now, as we see Kimi Räikkönen getting ready to go out for his final qualifying lap here in Montreal. Are you expecting him to be challenging for pole position, Laurence, or do you see it as a foregone conclusion that Mercedes are going to romp to another pole position?
Never say never in Formula One, but it does pretty much look like Hamilton or Rosberg have pole position wrapped up already.
And just to give you a bit of context here, the last time a car not powered by a Mercedes engine took pole position was at the 2013 Brazilian Grand Prix, when Sebastian Vettel took pole position. That is a staggering statistic and just shows how dominant Mercedes have been in the new era of Formula One.
It does. It really does show that Mercedes clearly put all their efforts since the regulation change plans came out. They've put all their efforts into it, and it's paid off dividends. Perhaps we might see other engines come to the fore eventually. I mean, Ferrari have improved this weekend. The Honda engine has been about 3 seconds faster over the 6 races we've had this season. As we see the two Lotus drivers, there fighting for track position, and I think it looked as though it was Roman Grosjean that had won that battle, but it looks like number 13, the unlucky number, Pastor Maldonado. Oh, that was close. Pastor Maldonado has got out of the pits first. Weirdly, it's not an unlucky number for Pastor Maldonado's native country, Venezuela, but it definitely wasn't unlucky for him there. Could have been much worse with his teammate there.
Yeah, we've seen penalties in the past given to Roman Grosjean for overtaking in the pit lane, and we could have seen problems there for him. As we see Lewis Hamilton going on to a flying lap here in Montreal, this is going to be crucial. This will most likely be his final flying lap. Onto the lap he goes, just ahead of his teammate Nico Rosberg. Räikkönen and Grosjean are already on flying laps. Hamilton comes through turn 2, nice and easy through there, runs it out nice and wide. We are on board with Räikkönen through turns 6 and 7. He has not set a great time. It's not the fastest time through the first sector. As we come down the straight down into turns 8 and 9, and then he will squirt down the hill towards the hairpin, runs it very close to the wall there, coming through here, and then a quick left-hander before braking hard for one of the slowest corners in the calendar. He's 0.3 of a second down on Lewis Hamilton through the second sector, but this is where the Ferrari will gain a lot of time. Coming down the back straight, what kind of speed trap figures are we going to see from the Ferrari of Kimi Räikkönen? His teammate, of course, went down in qualifying 1. How's this going to go for him now? Down into the final corner, 333 kilometers an hour to the speed trap, running it very close to the wall on the exit of the last corner. I don't think this is going to be good enough to overtake the Mercedes. And no, it's only good enough for third. So Räikkönen only improving by a few hundredths of a second. So not great for Räikkönen there, Laurence.
Unfortunately, not much he could do about that. I think there wasn't any more that he could have grabbed out of the car there. But I think the person to watch right now, not necessarily for challenging Mercedes, but in general jumping up that order, let's see what Sergio Perez can do. Providing he doesn't have a problem, I think we can expect quite a lot from the young Mexican now.
We are seeing Nico Hülkenberg, his teammate, come through the last corner here, and this isn't going to be his strongest lap of the weekend. but we could see him go on to another one. There is still time. 15 seconds left in this qualifying session. Hulkenberg stays 7th. No improvement in terms of position from him. We're riding on board with Valtteri Bottas down the back straight. What kind of time has he set? He hasn't set the fastest time, but this could challenge Raikkonen. What kind of time is this going to be? Coming through the final chicane, banging the curves very hard. Ricciardo goes 8th. That's his final time. What kind of time is this going to be from Bottas? Bottas goes 4th. He doesn't take the Ferrari of Raikkonen, but still takes the 2 Lotuses, who are still on flying laps. So we are about to see the final moments of qualifying 3. Lewis Hamilton coming down the back straight, and his teammate just a few meters behind him. Hamilton coming down the back straight towards the braking zone for the chicane. We lost out on pole position here last year after a lock-up down into this corner. Doesn't make a mess of it this time. Runs it out nice and close to the wall of champions. As he comes up to the line, this is going to be a very fast lap for Lewis Hamilton. It's a 1:14.5. It's not as fast as his earlier time, and that could cost him as we see Nico Rosberg come up towards the line. What kind of time is this going to be? It's a 1:14.8. So his teammate does not take him. So Hamilton, Rosberg, Raikkonen and Bottas have all set their final lap times. Raikkonen is already in Parc Ferme. We are still to see times from Grosjean and Maldonado. What kind of times are they running? Are they going to be able to challenge the Mercedes? We have a look at this clip of Raikkonen here, and Raikkonen came so close to hitting the wall there. Got a huge snap of oversteer out of turn 4. So he is very lucky with that. That is probably where he lost most of his time on that lap, Laurence.
It was, and I think we saw this problem slightly earlier in Q1 with Sebastian Vettel, his teammate trying to take the car for a clean lap, and it just didn't happen. He also got a snap of oversteer as he'd just gone through turn 2, and it looks as though Hamilton does have pole position. Rosberg 2nd. He doesn't repeat what he did last season, where he picked the Brit to the 1st position on the grid. And we're waiting to see on the footage where Grosjean and Maldonado, the 2 battling teammates that were fighting to get out of the pits, where they will finish. So we'll just have to wait and see for that one.
Looking at the timing sheets here, I can tell you that Grosjean is 5th with a 1:15.194, just a 1/10 of a second off Valtteri Bottas, and then 2/10 and a half further back is Pastor Maldonado on a 1:15.329. So strong showing from Lotus there, but I think Force India will be a little bit disappointed with failing to get a car into the top 5.
They will be. I think we saw in practice and even throughout Q1, Q2, they were quick, and I'm quite surprised that Sergio Perez hasn't made the most of one of his favourite tracks in Formula One. Results-wise, let's not forget he was on for a podium with thanks to a strategy. I think it was a one-stop strategy until he and Felipe Massa had an accident last year. I think they especially will be disappointed at the result this weekend. Red Bull were never really surprised, and I think Daniel Kvyat will be happy with what he's done. Daniel Ricciardo, it looked as though he had a little bit of an issue, but I think in the end he managed to get out and finish P9.
So we are just going to run you through the classifications. Lewis Hamilton has taken pole position for the Canadian Grand Prix with a 1:14.3. Just 4/10 further back is his teammate Nico Rosberg, who outqualified the Ferrari of Kimi Raikkonen by just 0.3 of a second. The big shock was that Raikkonen's teammate Sebastian Vettel went out in Q1. Valtteri Bottas is 4th, just ahead of the Lotus of Romain Grosjean, who is ahead of his teammate Pastor Maldonado. Then further position back is the Force India of Hulkenberg. He will be disappointed not to have been closer to the top 5. Then we have the 2 Red Bulls of Kvyat and Ricciardo. Perez will be very disappointed to have been outqualified by 2 Renault engine cars. Outside of the top 10, we have the 2 Toro Rossos of Sainz and Verstappen. We have the Saubers of Ericsson and Nasser sandwiching the McLaren Honda of Fernando Alonso. And then qualifying outside of the top 15, we have the Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel, the Williams of Felipe Massa, the Marussias of Mary and Stevens, and the McLaren of Button. And of course, we will see Fernando Alonso starting from the back of the grid tomorrow. He'll be starting in last, and Max Verstappen will be starting just ahead of him, I believe. So that will promote Roberto Merry up to 16th, Stevens up to 17th, and Vettel will start 14th with Massa 15th, and Ericsson will also move up a position along with Nasser. So yeah, in the end, no real surprises in Q3, Laurence, but we were treated to a bit of an exciting qualifying 1 session, unlike the trend which generally sees qualifying 3 be the most interesting of the sessions.
Yeah, I think in the end, what we saw in Q3 was pretty predictable. We saw Mercedes locking out the front row. We saw another pole position for Lewis Hamilton. We saw another second place for Nico Rosberg. And everything else seemed to fall in line, besides maybe a Lotus ending up on the third row. Q1 was quite interesting, but I don't think that should really be celebrated, since that was only interesting on the basis that two cars that should have been challenging Mercedes had technical issues. But we'll take what we can. Formula One is a sport, and a lot of people do watch it for the entertainment factor. As we see Nico Rosberg highlight his dismay at not being able to beat Lewis Hamilton and take another win to close the gap to Lewis Hamilton in the constructors drivers even for tomorrow. But yeah, it's a little bit disappointing. We didn't see Force India or Williams do anything more. I think we should be happy that Raikkonen is third, because at the end of the day, he is the most likely driver to be able to take it to Mercedes tomorrow, either if there's a problem or if everything goes right for him. But other than that, nothing really to talk about. I think one thing that will be quite interesting tomorrow is how Jenson Button does from the back of the field, taking on the manners and possibly fighting with his own teammate Fernando Alonso.
Yes, so I think we are going to leave it there for the qualifying session for the Canadian Grand Prix. Thank you very much for joining me, Laurence, and we will be back tomorrow evening with live coverage of the race for the Canadian Grand Prix, and we will hopefully be joined by Eoturno UK and potentially as well by another special guest who will be revealed closer to the time. But thank you very much for joining me, Laurence, and thank you very much to everyone for listening live to this broadcast. And we leave you on the note that Lewis Hamilton has taken pole position for the Canadian Grand Prix, and we hope that you have a good evening, and we hope that we can hear from you again tomorrow evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Good night.